Welcome. We have started with Sankhya, and you understand that Sankhya is a tradition, Hindu tradition. It is known for realism, dualism, and pluralism. There are two eternal substances. One is Prakriti, other is Purush. Prakriti and Purush are completely opposite. Prakriti is unconscious, material, it is active. Purush is pure consciousness. Purush is indivisible, it is a spiritual substance. In many ways, it shall remind you of Descartes. In Descartes, again, there's only one space in a way, matter, and then there are individual selves. And they have nothing in common. If self is res positans, then matter is res extensa. And they are dichotomous. That is, what is in one, other will not have that. Similarly, in this case, Prakriti and Purush are exclusive. They are like dichotomous realities, and nothing is common between the two. However, they believe the mere contact of Prakriti and Purush is sufficient to create the evolution of this world. So world evolves from the material cause Prakriti. When there is contact between Prakriti and Purush, the equilibrium of Prakriti, Samya Avastha of Gunas are disturbed. Gun tries to dominate upon each other, and then first evolute comes. What is the first evolute? Man, which is also Buddhi. Then we get Ahankar, and then Manas. And then we get 5 Indriyas, 5 Karmendriyas. And then we have, all of these are in some way about individual. We have Mahat, we have Ahankar, we have Manas, we have Gyanendriyas, we have Karmendriyas. Now, it is about physical realm, the world around you. That will have again Tan Matras and Mahabhutas. Subtle 5 elements and gross 5 elements. So these are in all 23 evolutes. Okay. So there is a kind of cycle of evolution. And again, everything is dissolved. It is like enveloping back to Prakriti. Okay. So the story is this way, but when it comes to explanation, they encounter so many problems. And the problem we will gradually see. And all these main criticisms are raised by Shankar. Shankar is propounding Advait, is position which is negating all kinds of plurality, even dualism, and hence Shankar thinks Sankhya is the principal opponent. In many ways, Shankar's position is Vedanta, based on Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and we will understand what is Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra of Badrayan. Sankhya is more ancient. And Sankhya is giving us a position which Shankar has to negate so that he could develop his monism. Thus, he thinks that Shankar thinks Sankhya is a principal opponent. Pradhan Mal. Okay? Because they don't hold these. This is how Shankar would give us some of the most pertinent criticism, and thereby he will eventually develop his Advaita position. We will see that gradually. So Shankar's criticism would be against this relation of Prakriti and Purush. So इसको हम लोग develop करेंगे. So you have understood 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. आज संख्या सीख के जाएगी. तो Sattva, Rajas, Tamas are the 3 constituent gunas of Prakriti. You understand Sattva, you know Rajas, you know Tamas. And these 3 gunas are giving plurality, diversity to this world, or to the objects of this world. Everywhere there is an intermingling. It is likely that one gunas may have a predominance over other. But yes, all the 3 qualities, there is pleasure, pain, apathy, all of them are present in every experience of this world. And strictly speaking, if there is a small, say, a stain in something which is like a Sattva gun, white, chota sa ek dag is more than sufficient to blemish the purity. So strictly speaking, this tradition is also emphasizing on suffering. And when we'll discuss something like problem of evil in paper 2, philosophy of religion, briefly we'll talk about that with reference to Sankhya also. Okay, so up. पुरुष पे वापिस आते हैं. They think Purush is beyond 3 gunas, निस्त्रय गुण या त्रिगुणातीत. Purush is outside Prakriti, so effectively this world is created out of Prakriti. So Purush is never in reality a part of this world. But Purush out of ignorance is identifying with what it is not. Prakriti is not self, but Purush out of ignorance identifies with this body, with Antahakaran, and hence it thinks it is going through joys, sorrow, or apathy. But strictly speaking, it is always the Prakriti which is in the state of bondage and which will attain liberation. When Purush gets to know I am different from Prakriti, it is in isolation. And that state is the state of Kaivalya. Keval Gyan is again there. That is, I am alone. I am not part of anything around me. And this is how Purush will attain liberation, moksha. Okay. So now, why should there be Purush? You have seen teleological argument, something like Sanghat Pararthatvat. You have seen a logical argument. If there are 3 gunas, then it is a logical necessity to have someone beyond the 3 gunas. So 3 gunadi viparyayat. Then we have some kind of, say, basis, ontological support, whereby the experience, the memory, the recognition can be explained, the knowledge can be explained. And this is very much like what Kant may say, unity of pure consciousness or apperception. As Shankar would say, one who negates the self is the self. So similarly, there is someone like Purush, who is the knower, owner of all these experiences. Then there can be an ethical argument. If these objects of the senses, which are like evolutes of Prakriti, are there, then there should be someone to enjoy it. Prakriti is the enjoyed. So Purusha should be there as the bhogi, the bhoktri bhava, the enjoyer. Then we have a kind of soteriological argument, or it has to do with religious, mystical argument. If you talk about bondage, then there should be someone who will be in a state of bondage. If you talk about liberation, then there should be someone who is the aspirant. So thus, we cannot talk about even this exam unless there are seekers for this coveted position. So similarly, there must be someone who has this pravritti to attain kavalya. So kavalyarth pravritti, and that is like again purush. Now you also understand realism. You understand that इसमें लिख के भी गई है वो. तो रियलिज्म, प्लूरलिज्म और डुअलिज्म सब लिखे गए हैं मक्की. तो अब we have to see the pluralism, which is बहु पुरुषवाद. Purush is not one. Individual self is not one, but many. To remind you, how many jivas are there in Jain? One or many? Many. How many atmans are there in Nyaya Vaisheshik? One or many? Many. So again, in the case of Sankhya also, many. Okay. But later, we'll understand in Shankar, there's only one atman. But even if in some tradition like a Shankar, there's only one Atman, and you will see in Ramanus again, there'll be many Jivas. In Madhva also, you will see there are many individual Jeev or soul. In Shankar, there is a kind of empirical phenomenal Jeev, and there is Atman. So when we are in a state of bondage, there is a kind of empirical phenomenal reality of empirical Jivas. But when we get to know who I am, we know Aham Brahm Asmi. Then we know Asmat Yusmat division was due to my ignorance. So, yani, we can make a distinction between phenomenal or empirical notion of I, and sometimes it is known as Jiva, Jivatma or Jeev. And when it comes to knowing who you are in true sense, Atman. So Atman is the only reality, and Atman is one with Brahman. And in the case of Sankhya, as Purush, we are many. And it is not only at a state of ignorance, but it remains so ontologically. But when they give arguments, arguments are completely contradictory of their original position. And thus, there is so much inconsistency. There is no relevant argument given for the plurality of Purush. And Shankar would come and very vehemently reject and suggest absolute unity. So, किस तरह के argument ये देते हैं? They would say that Purushas should be many, because we all take birth at different points of time. We are not born together, nor we die together. So to explain separate births and separate deaths, we need to talk about plurality of Purush. But they had earlier told us Purush is beyond creation, beyond destruction. Purush does not come into birth, nor Purush goes out of existence. आप बोल रहे हैं कि पुरुष अलग अलग होंगे, क्यों? Birth अलग अलग है, सबका date of birth अलग है, सबका date of death भी अलग होगा. तो पुरुष को होना चाहिए कई. Then our experiences are different. You have come for the class, certain people would be enjoying themselves, some students would be sleeping. So we all are having different experiences at the same point of time. So hence there must be many Purushas. Otherwise, how will you experience this different kinds of experience of different individuals? There is a kind of difference with regard to again our gunas. In some beings sattva may dominate, in other rajas may dominate, in other tamas would dominate. So there must be many Purushas. और पहले क्या बोला था? Purushas are त्रिगुणातीत. अब बोल रहे पुरुष में किसी में सत्व की प्रधानता है, some may have rajas as the principal gunas and so on and so forth. They talk about them as you were asking hierarchy. Yani suddenly they started to talk about that is this fly is also like a purush. So birds, animals, us, all of them are purushas, and there is a gradation. कोई उड़ के लिख रही है, so this is how ये पुरुष अलग है और हम लोगों की position अलग है, and hence all of them are they must be different purushas. Our bondage, our liberation, all of that has to be experienced individually. So hence, Purushas are many. As I said, the moment you go through the arguments, you find contradiction, you find inconsistency, complete incoherence, and thus it seems the arguments are not actually the arguments for the plurality of Purushas. Arguments become argument for the plurality of empirical self, which is like a Jeev, which is the ignorant being, and hence it is not right. So Shankar is giving the critique. Shankar then admires them. Why? You remember Prakriti. They say objects of the world are many, they are dependent, they are relative, they are momentary, they are impermanent. So there must be one cause, which is at once explaining plurality, diversity. In some way, they reduce plurality, diversity of the world to one unitary cause, and they call it Prakriti. So Shankar admires it. बहुत अच्छा काम किया आपने. So what they have done, plurality, diversity, multiplicity of the empirical world is reduced to one cause या unitary cause. एक cause भी आप लेके आए. If that is what you have already done, why don't you reduce बहु पुरुषवाद? Going by the same logic, जब यहाँ पे many can be reduced to one, why not many purushas shall be reduced to one purush? तो next argument क्या होगा? Then why not reduce Prakriti and Purush to one entity and call it Brahman or Atman? So Shankar is rejecting Sankhya so that Shankar will be able to propound Advait position. So Bahu Purushavad is not tenable and it has many problems. We will write it down, then we'll go to causation, we'll briefly talk about God, and Sankhya will be over. We'll go through the questions then. चलिए तो पहले इसको लिख लेते हैं. Alright, so Bahu Purushvad colon arguments for the plurality of Purush. Arguments for the plurality of Purush. लिखें. Unlike Advait Vedant, but like Jainism, Nyaya, Nyaya Vaisheshik. But like Jainism, Nyaya Vaisheshik, Mimamsa, and Mimamsa, Ramanus, and Madhva, comma, Sankhya accept the plurality of Purush. Unlike Advaita Vedanta, but like Jaina, Nyaya Vaisheshik, Mimamsa, Ramanus, Madhva, Sankhya accept plurality of Purush. Purushas have qualitative monism. Purushas have qualitative monism, but quantitative pluralism. Comma, like the Jiva of Jain, Atma ya Atman of Ramanus, and monads of Leibniz. Like the Jiva of Jain, Atma of Ramanus, and monads of Leibniz. Sankhya present the following arguments to prove the plurality of Purush. They present following arguments to prove the plurality of Purush. Colon number 1. People take birth separately and die separately. Yeah, birth and death of people are separate. People take birth separately and die separately. Had there been only one Purush, comma, the birth or death of one would have become the birth or death of all. Had there been only one Purush, the birth or death of one would have become the birth or death of all. Hence, Purush is not one, but many. Purush is not one, but is many. But is plural. अगला लिखें. Different people have different experiences of the world. Different people have different experiences of the world. For some, comma, the world is pleasant. For the others, comma, it is painful or indifferent. Had there been only one Purush, comma, there would have been common experience of the world. Had there been only one Purush, there would have been common experience of the world. Hence, Purush is many. Next one. If one person is active, then the others are passive or lazy. If one Purush is in a state of bondage, then the other is in a state of liberation. All of these can be explained sufficiently by accepting Bahupurushvad, that is the plurality of the Purush. Next, in some person, comma, Sattva predominates. While in others, Rajas or Tamas. Hence, people differ in their nature and outlook. These distinctions cannot be explained. Comma, if there is only one Purush. Next, there is a gradation of beings. There is a gradation hierarchy. Of beings. Some people are superior, while others are of lower grades, comma, including animals and birds. The gradations would remain inexplicable. Comma, if there is only one Purush. Thus, there is a Bahu Purushvad. So these are the arguments. Now we'll see critical analysis or criticism, evaluation. Likhe. Shankar argues that the arguments are inconsistent and they are in complete violation of their original conception of Purush. The arguments are inconsistent and they are in complete violation or they are in complete contradiction of their original conception of Purush. They seem to equate phenomenal जीव या phenomenal ego. They seem to क्या कहा था मैंने equate phenomenal ego या parenthesis में जीव with ontological Purush. If the Purush is Trigunatit, if the Purush is Trigunatit, comma, Purush can never participate in the world. Birth, death, experiences of the world, all of these are applicable to phenomenal ego and not to the Purush. Effectively, Prakriti itself is the enjoyer and the enjoyed. समझ रहे हैं अंतर? Effectively, comma, Prakriti itself is the enjoyer and the enjoyed. To talk about predominance of one gun over other does not make sense with regard to the Purush. Purush is always outside Prakriti. Hence, it is never in a state of bondage, nor does it attain liberation. It is the Prakriti which is in bondage and which attains liberation. That is, phenomenal ego is in bondage and can attain liberation. Phenomenal ego is an evolute of Prakriti. Moreover, Shankar applauds, appreciates, admires. Shankar admires Sankhya's, Sankhya with apostrophe, Sankhya's attempt to explain plurality and diversity of the world, their attempt to explain plurality and diversity of the world through a unitary cause, hyphen, namely Prakriti. Shankar argues that going by the same logic, Bahu Purushvad, the plurality of Purush, selves, he argues that going by the same logic, Bahu Purushvad can also be reduced to one universal Atman. Further, the duality of Prakriti and Purush can be reduced to one unitary cause, hyphen, namely Brahman. समझ में आई बात? So Shankar has argued against Bahu Purushvad, and briefly we'll understand the criticisms. One aspect about Prakriti Purush coming in contact was left yesterday because I first discuss causation, then we'll come to that argument. So now, Ji. How Prakriti attains liberation? Prakriti attains liberation is again like allegorical. Idea is that this sense of I that now we have, actually we are equating ourselves with this being. So when we think about bondage, that is, we are in this world of names, forms, sensual pleasure. Who is experiencing it? The phenomenal ego. This is always in a state of liberation. It is a trigunatid, outside. But it is identifying itself with who it is not self. And when it knows that I'm different, Sankhya ka one matlab is a discriminatory knowledge. So knowledge that I'm different, it knows I was never there. And effectively, this has gone. It has disappeared. Consciousness is withdrawn. This so-called body is gone. It disappears because consciousness is giving light awareness to that. So जैसे ये एक तरह से non-existent हो गया, तो this is like gone, or it is like metaphorically it has attained liberation. तो ये हमेशा से यही पे था. It never came in the sansar, nor does it come out of it. Ontologically, it is always there. As long as it did not know its true being, it thought, but that was someone else. तो ये मतलब है कहने का कि ego, empirical self, is in the bondage and it attains liberation.
So which is already attained liberation. So it has been not stuck in the vicious cycle of birth and death.
जो identity है, this identity is continuing. So this identity is continuing, so there is a continuous, as long as it remains ignorant. Ignorance is beginningless. So until once it gets to know who I am, then it will be liberated. It's like saying that you are mistaking a snake, a rope for a snake. And once you know that it is a rope, you realize it was this forever. But in initial stages, you were completely participating in it. So once you know the true nature that this is not me, you come back to your original view. And this is where you were from the very beginning. So knowledge, epistemological orientation is changing. Something that was existing is no longer existing because Purush is no longer attending to it. Purush is withdrawn. And hence, there is no consciousness with this Prakriti. जैसे analogy क्या था? Purush is there and Prakriti is for the sake of Purush. Prakriti will take care of Purusha's needs while Purush is in a state of bondage and then make sure that Purush attains liberation. So the analogy, which is so misogynistic, is that it is like the dancer who would come before the audience and show all her charms, all shades of her beauty. And once audience has seen all aspects of her beauty, she would never reappear before such audience out of a sense of shame or shyness. It has now disappeared. So once Purush gets to know who is Prakriti and who am I, this Prakriti will never appear before this Purush.
The embedded state cannot practice ignorance.
Cannot be practiced.
Cannot practice ignorance.
मैं ठीक से समझा नहीं आप क्या बोलना चाह रहे हैं? It is like this. जो practical example है उसे समझिए. Initially, you may think that probably you cannot write, or there are many things we think we cannot do. But once you are exploring and you get to do that, you get to know that, okay, I was capable of doing that. You had the capability, but there was a kind of psychological mental block. But you were yourself, even when you did not know your true being. Similarly, Purush is always outside three gunas, but he does not know it. This ignorance is beginningless. So जब तक वो sense नहीं है that I am different, Purush will continue to identify everything with this body. And this body is an evolute of Prakriti. कुछ चीजें भी जब लोग योगा में जाएंगे तो और क्लियर होगा, ठीक है? तो अब आते हैं थ्योरी ऑफ कॉजेशन जी बहुत बेकार है तो वो आपने लिखा भी है दैट आर्गुमेंट्स आर टू वीक आर्गुमेंट्स आर इनकंसिस्टेंट देयर इज कंप्लीट इनकोहेरेंस एंड दे आर इन कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन ऑफ देयर ओरिजिनल पोजीशन तो कमजोर है अब है तो है ओके तो लेट्स नो थ्योरी ऑफ कॉजेशन वी ऑलरेडी नो फॉर इफेक्ट द वर्ड इज कार्य एंड व्हेन इट एग्जिस्ट्स द टर्म इज सत कार्यवाद बट सम ऑफ देम मे एक्सेप्ट असत कार्यवाद न्याय वैशेषिक would accept asatya karyavad, while Sankhya will accept satya karyavad. What is satya karyavad? Satya karyavad suggests that karan, cause, and karya are one and the same. Karya is always implicit. Karya and karan are like two stages, and they are one and the same. Something, when it is in the state of implicit form, you call it cause, and it can come in the explicit form, you call it effect. And if you think that a karya is absent, then in a way, effect becomes what? A non-entity. If something does not exist, it can never come into existence. It is like nothing. A non-entity like a hare's horn. In classical again example, you will see same misogyny to sometime bandhiya putra, barren woman child. Or a better one is akash kusum, sky flower, or we can say a square circle. So जो non-entity है वो कभी existence में नहीं आ सकती है. And if you say that a karya is non-existent in karan, cause, then anything shall come out of anything. But that is not the case. You need seed to extract oil. You need milk to create a curd. Had cause and effect been different, you should have extracted oil from sand. You should have extracted or say turned water into curd, but that's not happening. So hence, karya and karan are essentially one and the same. They are just two stages. Something which is implicit eventually becomes explicit. So Prakriti is the cause. And the name, form, plurality, diversity is the effect, and it can again come back. So the world of name, forms, plurality, diversity is the explicit state. And when it is in the samyavastha, it is the implicit state. So this is how they talk about Satya Karyavad in complete opposition to Nyaya Vaisheshik's Asatya Karyavad. But Satya Karyavad has two versions. They think, as the example have been given, effect was pre-existing, but the cause undergoes a real change. There is a real transformation. And hence, effect is nothing but a parinam, real change, real transformation of the cause. Curd is the real change or transformation of milk. Okay, so ये जो transformation है, the term could be what? Parinam. What is the name of the cause? Prakriti. So their theory of causation, Satyakariyavad, can also be called Prakriti Parinamvad. ठीक है, तो सांख्य ने क्या प्रोपाउंड किया? सत्यकार्यवाद. बट सत्यकार्यवाद कैन बी रियल चेंज ऑफ कॉज इनटू इफेक्ट, परिणाम. तो सिंस कॉज इज प्रकृति, तो नाम क्या होगा? प्रकृति परिणामवाद. व्हेन विल कम टू वेदांत, द अल्टीमेट इज व्हाट? ब्रह्मन. और शॉर्ट में ब्रह्म भी बोल सकते हैं. तो रामानुज वुड अग्री विद सांख्य that Brahman undergoes real modification, real change, real transformation. तो क्या शब्द होगा उनकी कॉज का? ब्रह्म परिणामवाद under सत्यकार्यवाद. But Shankar, chronologically Shankar is before Ramanuj, but then Shankar's follower would debate with Ramanuj or their followers also. But then Shankar would argue against Parinamvad of Sankhya. So Shankar's point is, if a cause and effect are one and the same, you cannot talk about a change. The moment you talk about a change, you believe effect is different from the cause. So the so-called effect is actually without any transformation of cause. Cause alone is there, and there is no change in the real sense of the term. For example, if you have seen snake, and after a while you know it is a rope, it wasn't that for some time a rope had become a snake to create a panic in you. इसको डरा दे क्या? तो रस्सी कुछ देर के लिए सांप बन के उठ गई. ऐसा नहीं था. It was always a rope. You were not careful. So thus, cause never changes. Cause always remains what it is. But you may mistake it. So this is what? Mere appearance. And the term for appearance is what? Vibirth. Vibirth is like abhas. Vibirth is apparent. No real transformation. Waves are vibirth. Water is not other than the waves. So this is how the way you think the world, etc., is actually just an apparent reality. It is not real. So hence, Brahma Vivartavad. And Shankar believes if you talk about real transformation, you go back to Asatyakariyavad. ठीक है? तो अब एक और argument था. Sankhya is explaining the contact between Prakriti and Purush. Earlier we had seen the analogy of grass, magnet, lame and blind men coming together. But no amount of analogies, explanations could satisfy the critics. The question remains, they are completely different. How would they come into contact? So they give another explanation. Now they say that actually Purush is equating itself with its reflection. And the reflection is in Mahat or Buddhi. Okay? Purush is not coming in contact. Purush is equating itself with its reflection. In Mahat, Mahat has a predominance of Sattva, so it is luminous. And it is identifying with this, so hence, reflection is conscious now. Consciousness is with Purush. But since Purush is identifying, this Mahat is like conscious. And this reflected Purush comes in contact with Prakriti, not the Purush oneself. तो ये जवाब था उनका. तो शंकर says, बहुत बढ़िया. But didn't you say that Mahat is the first evolute? Mahat comes once equilibrium is disturbed. तो यानी पहले disturbance हो चुका है. अच्छा, तो ये गलती हो गई. फिर सांख्य is reminded कि अच्छा ये तो सोचिए आप क्या करें. तो they say, okay, अच्छा दूसरा तो अब the reflection is in Prakriti itself. And this reflected Purush is coming in, Purush is identifying itself with the reflected image, and this reflected Purush is coming in contact with Prakriti. यानी contact is not real. Contact is what? आभास. तो अगर फिर से संयोग का contact का आभास है, real नहीं है, तो शंकर से बढ़िया है. तो that means if it is आभास, the world has become Vivarth. Abhas is resulting into Vivarth. Then world cannot remain real. So Sankhya is, no matter how hard is trying, could not explain how Prakriti Purush come into contact, and Shankar is completely rejecting their view, thinking they are the main opponent, and then propounds his Advaita position. Now, what is their view with regard to God? Some people say that the ancient Sankhya was probably theistic, and it comes in contact with other traditions, including Jaina, Buddhism, and then certain influences come, and then classical Sankhya becomes atheistic. There are some scholars of later period like Vigyan Bhikshu. He is trying to prove that Sankhya should be theistic. But generally, most of the positions of Sankhya scholars have negated reality of God. And they say, we don't need God. Prakriti and Purush are more than sufficient. Generally speaking, the God who is the personal God is someone who is beyond change. Perfection implies immutability. There should be no movement or change. But if someone who is without movement, changeless, cannot be the creator. To be a creator, one has to go through change. If one will not act, how can one create? So hence, God is not explained properly. Moreover, if God is absolutely perfect, what is the need to create a world? And whatever you do because it is important to do. But God being absolutely perfect will have no reason to create a world. And hence, there should be no God. If God is there, then soul of being individual Atmas cannot remain immortal. Because if souls are there with God, then there are two possibilities. Either souls are part of the God or souls are created by God. If souls are part of God, then God being supremely divine, some of the perfections would be there in Atman as well. But that is not the case. And if it is created, anything that is created is liable to go out of existence. It cannot remain immortal. So overall, there is no justification. Why should there be God? And these are again some of the arguments against the existence of God. You can use them against Nyaya Vaisheshik also. तो कई बार जब आप criticism लिखेंगे, like yesterday there were a few questions, you may say criticisms of Jaina as well as Sankhya scholars can be against Nyaya position with regard to personal God. So Sankhya should be seen as atheistic. For Nyaya, Shabd, scriptures are the words of personal God. So the text is personal testimony. But for Sankhya, scriptures are apaurushya, impersonal. No one has written them. Teachings themselves are timeless, eternal, universal. So most of the eminent Indian philosophers who are from our own traditions, like Professor Hiriana, S.N. Dasgupta, so they would prefer to characterize Sankhya as atheistic. So thus, it is better to call Sankhya Nirishwar. And only because there is no God in Sankhya, it can be called Nirishwar Sankhya. And only because God is in Yoga, it should be called Seshwar, with Ishwar. So Yoga भी हम लोग देखेंगे, शायद time मिलेगा. And Yoga accepts every position of Sankhya, metaphysics, epistemology. And there is a God, but that God is different from the God of Nyaya. And Yoga will emphasize on ethical aspect or soteriological aspect, and they will help us understand a way of life, whereby the individual self, the ignorant Purush, will know it is different from Prakriti and will attain Kaivalya or Keval state. ठीक है जी? ये तो मैंने आपको फर्स्ट इंडियन फिलोसफी की क्लास में बोला था, ये आस्तिक गॉड में आस्था को लेके नहीं है. हाँ, तो इनकी आस्था जो है वो वेद में है, ना कि गॉड में है. ओके, तो वेद किसी के लिए टीचिंग्स ऑफ गॉड है, पर्सनल गॉड है, एंड सांख्य मीमांसा के लिए देयर इज नो ऑथर. दैट इज द ट्रूथ कैन नॉट बी क्रिएटेड. Truth is universal, timeless, and what is already there, you can also write it. So the seers have seen them, and they have also just recorded what is already there. For example, if say you read many books and you create something out of it, you just reproduce it. You cannot take that claim that I have created it. You just have to accept that truth is always there, prior and independent to me. I have just again reiterated what is already there. तो scriptures में जो लिखा है वो creation नहीं है, वो documentation है जो truth already exist कर रहा है. They are eternal and timeless. ठीक है? तो हर किसी का interpretation अलग अलग है. न्याय वैशेषिक के लिए they are the words of God, but not for Sankhya, not for Mimamsa. Okay, so we'll see first question from 2023, and then we'll come to our own handout. 5B, a short notes. If Purush and Prakriti are two completely independent realities, then no relation between the two is possible. In the light of this statement, make a brief presentation of Shankar दोनों तरफ से लिख सकते हैं. Of Sankhya dualism. Okay. If Purush and Prakriti are two completely independent realities, then no relation between the two is possible, unquote. In the light of this statement, make a brief presentation of Shankar's criticism of Sankhya dualism. So the very statement is a critique of Sankhya. And what is the point? As earlier, today also, and yesterday we had seen, all the analogies. What are the analogies? Grass turning into milk for the nourishment of the cow. Magnet attracting iron particle. Two, especially abled, a lame and a blind, come together for a common cause. And then later they talk about abhas. The contact is not real, but contact is apparent. Purush identifies itself with its reflection in Mahat. Again, you understand the criticism? Then they further revise. Purush identifies itself with its reflection in Prakriti. तो हर पॉइंट पे शंकर का क्रिटिसिज्म है. You should also emphasize that for Shankar, Sankhya is pradhan mal, principal opponent. And briefly towards conclusion, you say that Shankar vehemently rejects all arguments in support of Bahupurushvad and suggests the way plurality, diversity of the world is reduced to unitary cause, Prakriti, going by the same logic, Bahupurushvad be reduced to universal Atman or one Atman, one Purush. Again, the dualism of Prakriti and Purush be reduced to one reality, namely Brahman. तो इस हिसाब से आप इसको conclude कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? Now come to 2022. Examine and evaluate the proofs given by Sankhya philosophy to prove the existence of Purush. So you have certain arguments for the existence of Purush, then you have Bahupurushvad, और दोनों को मिला के शंकर का criticism लिखिए. And it is almost like what we just discussed a little while ago. You have written Bahupurushvad and the inconsistency is so evident, and Shankar's point is they are equating phenomenal Jeev with ontological Purush. लेकिन उधर फिर से वही problem है. Why should there be a Purush to enjoy? Because Purush is Trigunatit. How can there be a Purush who will attain bondage, who is in bondage, who will attain liberation? Because being Trigunatit, Purush is always outside this world. So लगभग वही सारी criticism आपको यहाँ भी लिखना है. 2021. Explain the Sankhya view on three gunas, Guntraya, and their modifications. So what is this? Three gunas constitute Prakriti, and then the equilibrium is disturbed when Prakriti comes in contact with Purush. And thereby evolution starts. और शुरू में हम लोगों ने रिकॉल किया था what are the 23 volumes. आपको सारे volumes डिटेल में लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, 5 करके लिख देंगे तो काम चल जाएगा. And then you talk about the related problem in your handout right after Prakriti. Same criticisms are there and later they are developed properly. If a Purush is unconscious, how does it know that it has to work for the ends of a Purush? If Prakriti is unconscious, unintelligent, how can it explain or how can it establish order, harmony, design, purpose in the world? Prakriti is unintelligent. How does it know that I don't have to appear before this Purush? This Purush has seen through me. So all of these are very inconsistent. Moreover, Prakriti is eternal. Purush is eternal. So if mere contact, mere presence of a Purush can disturb the equilibrium, then why the equilibrium is disturbed at some point and it is in a state of equilibrium at other point? Purush being eternal, equilibrium should always remain disturbed and creation will become forever. But that is not the case. Again, Purush is Trigunatit, conscious, inactive, and Prakriti is active, unconscious. There is no third entity, tertium quid. How do they come into contact? And analogies of grass, magnet, especially a bird, Sanyog, Abhas, none of them help them explain the relation properly. जी
23 जो यूनिट्स थे उसमें 5 ज्ञानेंद्रिय 5 ज्ञानेंद्रिय 5 का मतलब 5 की खाली तो इनको एक बार 5 ज्ञानेंद्रिय तो ये हुई
कर्मेंद्रियाज में हाथ पैर खाना खाना द वे वी डिस्पोज ऑफ वेस्ट मटेरियल ये सब हो गया कर्मेंद्रियाज. एयर वाटर फायर अर्थ जो पंचभूत है सटल फॉर्म में एंड देन इट इज इन ग्रॉस फॉर्म. वही महाभूत जब जैसे एयर अभी जो है और एयर सटल फॉर्म में एक तरह से लाइक इन न्याय एटॉमिक. तो यहाँ पे जो एटॉमिक के बजाय वो सटल है, सूक्ष्म. ये वाटर सूक्ष्म एंड व्हेन यू सी वाटर एवरीवेयर एटमॉस्फेयर में भी है तो दिस इज लाइक महाभूत. महाभूत का सूक्ष्म रूप. तन मात्रा एयर वाटर फायर अर्थ है, 5 जो पंचभूत है वो है इन सूक्ष्म फॉर्म. महाभूत ग्रॉस फॉर्म उसका बिगर वर्जन वही है. जैसे अभी जो यहाँ पे भी एटमॉस्फेयर में वाटर है, मॉइस्चर है और बॉटल में भी है, तो बॉटल वाला महाभूत हुआ. जो एटमॉस्फेयर में मॉइस्चर है वो है ये तन मात्रा एंड दिस इज महाभूत. मिट्टी ग्रॉस फॉर्म में है सामने एंड दिस अर्थ इन एकदम डस्ट पार्टिकल में भी इसमें भी उड़ रहा है डस्ट, तो ये है तन मात्रा. ओके 2020. A mango tree is grown out of a mango seed, unquote. How will Sankhya system explain this process through their theory of causation by rejecting their rival perspectives? तो बताएं. परिणामवाद and mango tree. So cause and effect are essentially one and the same. It is the explicit and implicit state. And rival theory में असत्य कार्यवाद और विवर्तवाद को भी लिख देंगे. 2019 और एक पार्ट आप लिख सकते हैं. Again it depends on the choice of questions you will make that day. तो आप ये भी लिख सकते हैं कि कैसे नागार्जुना through his prasang method would claim all the views are forming a continuum, they are relative and none of them can be the final, the absolute view. Conclusion में एक लाइन. Critically discuss the metaphysical status of a jeev and a purush according to Sankhya philosophy. तो क्या है metaphysical status of a jeev? It is like the antahkaran, mahat, ahankar and manas. So this jeev is an evolute of Prakriti. Mahat has predominance of a sattva, hence it is luminous. Purush is reflecting itself in Mahat and due to ignorance is identifying with not self. And hence, what is unconscious? जैसे मैंने कहा ये सब चीजें हम लोग योग में देखेंगे तो वहां से भी कुछ चीजों को यहाँ ला सकते हैं. So जीव which is essentially unconscious becomes conscious. It is like a borrowed consciousness of Purush. And this jiva is the enjoyer, etc., etc. तो प्रकृति का ही अंश है. तो सांख्य is overall explaining everything in this way. But suddenly, when it comes to certain arguments on बहुपुरुषवाद, उस समय जीव और पुरुष को confuse करने लगते हैं. तो that you can put as criticism also. So this is how जीव and पुरुष are different. But in many cases or at many instances, they start to equate one with other, especially when they present argument for the बहुपुरुषवाद or plurality of Purush. And that is how Shankar would criticize. तो जीव त्रिगुणमय है, while पुरुष is त्रिगुणातीत है, निस्त्रय गुण है. 2019 next. Which Sankhya proof for the existence of Prakriti actually shows that there can be only one Prakriti? Justify your answer. तो अगर आपको याद हो तो आर्ग्यूमेंट कि कुछ टेक्निकल वर्ड्स हैं, इट मे नॉट बी इजी, बट इवन इफ यू राइट द आइडिया तो आप उसको बेसिक स्टोरी फॉर्म में लिख सकते हैं. हाउएवर क्योंकि क्वेश्चन आ चुका है तो द लास्ट वन इज मोर डायरेक्ट, बट दैट डज नॉट मीन दिस इज द ओनली वन. In fact, all the arguments are suggesting that Prakriti should only be one. But primarily, याद है avibhagat vaishvarupasya. But even when the argument is bhedanam parimanat, it is suggesting the same thing. If there is a plurality, if there is a duality, then it will require a cause. And अगर एक प्रकृति से ज्यादा है तो फिर से उन दोनों को reduce करना होगा एक पे ही. So you may say that the more direct is this. However, the remaining ones are also pointing towards the same thing. And bhedanam parimanat samanvayat karyatah pravrittescha karan karya vibhagat and avibhagat vaishvarupasya. 2018. Is Purusha one or many? Explain the Sankhya position in this regard and give arguments in support of your answer. So for the Sankhya, Purusha is many. They propound Bahupurushavad. लेकिन फिर they often confuse between Jiva, phenomenal ego with Purush. तो वो सारी points आज लिखे हैं, आप लिख सकते हैं. Next, given its a theory of causation, is it possible for Sankhya to explain the presence of consciousness in the world? Discuss. Given its a theory of causation, is it possible for Sankhya to explain the presence of consciousness in the world?
Yes.
Discuss. So for Sankhya, they try their best, but critics don't agree. And given its theory of causation, so what is the cause? The cause is Prakriti, and Prakriti is unconscious. So hence, question is saying if Prakriti as a cause does not have anything in the implicit form, so the effect is not coming into existence in true sense of the term. Effect is making explicit what is implicit. So कैसे ये world cannot be conscious when the cause is unconscious? So they explain consciousness with reference to the ignorance of a Purush. So Purush is illuminating unconscious Jiva, Antahkaran, due to its ignorance. It identifies itself with what it is not with not self. So they are explaining it with certain analogies. Analogies could be of that grass, blind and lame, and then also abhas. But overall your position would be, while they do their best, they are unable to answer the critical analysis or the critical observations of rival traditions, particularly Shankar. तो उस हिसाब से if we understand strictly the causation, there can be no consciousness in the world, because conscious being Purusha is Trigunatit, is always outside the world. There is a complete dichotomy, separation between world, the Prakriti, and Purusha, the conscious being. 2016. Critically examine the role of Prakriti in the process of evolution. तो जितनी बातें हम लोग पहले देखे थे. State and examine the Sankhya proofs for the existence of a Purush. Exactly same 2022 वाला question है. 2014. Are the arguments given in favor of existence of Prakriti adequate in Sankhya philosophy? तो सारे criticisms अभी we were discussing. Prakriti is unintelligent, Prakriti is unconscious. How does it serve the purpose of Purush? How does it know this Purush has seen me, so I should not appear? If Prakriti is unintelligent, how can it establish order, harmony in the world? And again, the contact could not be explained sufficiently. A blend of both, where you say something like they suggest or they maintain that Prakriti, despite being unconscious and unintelligent, act for the sake of a Purush, or Prakriti serve the ends of a Purush. It creates objects of joy or pleasure while Purush is in the sansar or is in the state of ignorance, and then enables a Purush to realize its true nature to attain Kaivalya. But critics observe, if it is unintelligent, if it is unconscious, then how can it work for the sake of a Purush? They explain with the analogy of grass turning into milk for the nourishment of calf. But critics observe, grass becomes milk when it is eaten by a cow, and a cow has a motherly love for the calf. When grass remains uneaten, or grass by itself is not turning into milk, hence the position of Sankhya remains unexplained or problematic. दोनों को for against करके लिख रही है. 2014 next. Examine the Sankhya view on liberation, that the self is neither bound nor liberates, nor does it transmigrate. So you already know Purush is Trigunatit, and this is like the original conception of a Purush. Purush is a mere drashta, a mere witness. It has never actually participated. So due to its ignorance, it identifies itself with the not-self. It is equating itself with the reflection of itself in Mahat. But when it acquires right knowledge, it knows I am different from Prakriti. That is the meaning of Sankhya, is a discriminatory knowledge. And then in criticism you say, however, their view is not consistent. During Bahupurushvad, or when they present argument to support Bahupurushvad, they start to confuse Purush with phenomenal Jeev. और तब वही बातें फिर से समझ लेंगे. 2013. Evaluate the relation, if any, between Purush and Prakriti. तो फिर से prose, that is a thesis, and then you write the cons antithesis. And no matter, और थोड़ा सा आप लिख सकते हैं, the debate is very similar to what Descartes had to face in explaining mind-body interactionism. 2012. How Sankhya theory of causation is different from that of Nyaya theory of causation? तो ये फिर से वही क्वेश्चन है, and conclusion के लिए you can subscribe to Nagarjuna. Examine Sankhya's arguments for Bahupurushvad, which we discussed a little while ago. Compare Aristotle's view regarding causation with that of the Sankhya school's view of causation. कैसे सिमिलैरिटी है एंड कैसे डिफरेंस है? कुछ ब्रेनस्टॉर्म कीजिए. एरिस्टोटल याद है ना, कंफ्यूज नहीं हो रहा है. एरिस्टोटल एग्जिस्टेंशियलिस्ट नहीं थे, जर्मन थे एरिस्टोटल. कब आए एरिस्टोटल? ओके, तो हाउ, हाँ, दिसंबर में आए थे, शुरू में आए थे. तो क्या सिमिलैरिटी आपको लग रहा है? कैसे? एरिस्टोटल का पहले कॉजेशन याद कीजिए, जैसे सीखे थे. कितने कॉज थे? व्हाट वाज द वर्ड जिससे कि आपको थोड़ा सा अंतर कर सके मॉडर्न थ्योरी ऑफ कॉजेशन एंड एरिस्टोटल्स थ्योरी ऑफ कॉजेशन? कोई शब्द याद आ रहा है? कुछ आई याद है कुछ? हाँ, तो पहले याद कीजिए एरिस्टोटल ने पढ़े क्या थे. तो कॉजेशन ऑफ एरिस्टोटल इज नॉट ओनली गिविंग अस मैकेनिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन बट आल्सो टेलियोलॉजिकल. इट आंसर्स बोथ हाउ एंड व्हाई. तो यहाँ भी क्रिएशन इज टेलियोलॉजिकल. प्रकृति इज क्रिएटिंग वर्ल्ड फॉर द सेक ऑफ अ पुरुष एंड इज अगेन पेविंग द पाथ फॉर द लिबरेशन ऑफ अ पुरुष. अभी मैं बुलेट पॉइंट के रूप में आपको याद दिलवा रहा हूँ. देन एरिस्टोटल गिव्स यू 4 causes. What happens to the 4 causes eventually? Do they remain 4 or they can be reduced to 1, 2, matter and form? Matter and form becomes the central doctrine of Aristotle. Whether you study substance, you study causation, you want to understand actuality, potentiality, at every level, matter and form comes in the picture. So 4 causes can be reduced to matter and form. But matter and form in the case of Aristotle is always relative, inseparable, and in this world they cannot be distinguished. So matter and form are essentially one and the same. Similarly, when we think about a human being, body is matter and conscious self is like the form, soul is the form. But matter and form, material and spiritual reality in the case of Aristotle are not dichotomous. They are one and the same. There can be various degrees, gradations. And then there is a God as a pure form, who is pure form without matter. तो उस हिसाब से देखें तो वो प्योर फॉर्म इज लाइक पुरुष हु वुड नेवर पार्टिसिपेट. एंड इफ यू इक्वेट प्रकृति विच इज conscious with the borrowed consciousness of a purush, so as long as the purush is in the state of ignorance, objects of this world remain there for empirical जीव. तो 2-3 पॉइंट को आपको सिमिलैरिटी को हाईलाइट करना है, डिससिमिलैरिटी को एम्फसाइज करना है. तो व्हाट इज द पॉइंट ऑफ डिससिमिलैरिटी? दैट इन द केस ऑफ सांख्य देयर इज a dichotomous reality of prakriti and purush. Whenever they seem to be together, it is phenomenal. It is not ontologically the case. It is from the perspective of ignorant Purush. The world is real because it is a real transformation. But Sankhya struggles in explaining it sufficiently. So going by their understanding, Purush and Prakriti, the association is only at the level of empirical realm, and Purush is always outside 3 gunas. So there is a clear separation between matter and form, or matter and spiritual being, conscious being. In the case of Aristotle, it is always one and the same. But there is actuality and potentiality. However, when we understand the actuality, potentiality aspect of Aristotle, and we think about its causation, the so-called effect is always implicit in the cause. तो पहले कुछ points की similarity बताइए और last में overall difference क्या है वो बताइए. Okay, next one is 2007. Explain the Sankhya doctrine of 3 gunas. तो ये कई बार हो चुका है. Critically discuss the Sankhya theory of causation, and Shankar would argue, and then you can bring about Nagarjuna's point to respond back to everyone. तो शुरू में परिणामवाद विवर्तवाद का आर्ग्यूमेंट होगा. Sankhya doctrine of liberation, and you understand the problem. Sankhya theory of evolution of Prakriti. Sankhya arguments for the existence of Prakriti. Doctrine of plurality of Purush, Bahupurushvad. तो फिर से वही सारे क्वेश्चंस टाइम एंड अगेन यू सी. आप लोगों को योग का हैंडआउट आ गया है ना? आज नहीं हैंडआउट? अच्छा, अपलोड भी नहीं हुआ है. ओके, हाँ.
So can you please tell again the pick up line for completely? If Purush and Prakriti are 2 completely independent realities, then no relation between the 2 is possible.
हाँ, तो you would say that the statement is made by Shankar. Shankar considers Sankhya as the principal opponent. He argues that Sankhya could not satisfactorily explain the relation between Prakriti and Purush. The analogies of grass turning into milk, magnet attracting iron particles, 2 especially abled, a lame and blind coming together, fail to explain the relation between Prakriti and Purush. Moreover, even when they talk about the apparent contact, where they claim it is not the Purush oneself, but the reflection of a Purush in Mahat comes in contact with Prakriti. Shankar observes that how can Mahat be there? Mahat is the first evolute. Mahat can come only after the disturbance of equilibrium. They again explain the relation between Prakriti and Purush with Purusha's reflection in Prakriti. But thereby they end up suggesting the contact is not real but apparent. And hence the empirical world would become a vivarth and it ceases to remain parinam. तो इस हिसाब से शॉर्ट नोट्स है तो पॉइंट्स आपको कम ही लिखने हैं. ठीक है, ओके. तो अब आते हैं योग पे. yoga is with reference to right now Patanjali's text, Yoga Sutra. And it is estimated that somewhere around 4th century or maybe 1st or 2nd century BCE, Patanjali was there. Yoga, literally, the word is yuj. Yuj means union. It is like going through a way of life whereby one being can unite oneself with Supreme Being. Yoga has been discussed by many other traditions. We have in Upanishads, we have in Bhagavad Gita, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. We will be talking about integral yoga in the case of Sri Aurobindo also. However, this yoga tradition by Patanjali has accepted the metaphysics and epistemology of Samkhya with one important improvisation or amendment that there is a God. We will understand the significance of God in due course of the discussion. And they prescribe a practical life, a way of life, whereby a soul, a Purush can attain its intrinsic perfections and can go out of the life or the vicious cycle of birth and death. So this yoga can help Purush acquire discriminatory knowledge. I am different from Prakriti. So although there are 196 sutras in the text, there are many chapters, but we will be focusing on the central teaching, what is a yoga and the related component. So overall, what is a yoga? The text says, Yogas Chit Vritti Nirodh ya Nirodha. Yogas Chit Vritti Nirodh or Nirodha. Yoga is an intervention, it is a way of life, whereby the vritti, modifications, whereby the modifications of chitta, what is the chitta? Antahkaran. एक तरह से चित्त is महत या बुद्धि, then you have ahankar and you have manas. However, even if you say chitta is mahat, because these are implicit. हर चीज प्रकृति से, तो प्रकृति से महत, बाकी चीजें महत में implicit हैं. तो hence चित्त can be like अंतःकरण, internal organ, internal sense of being I, empirical ego, या उसको बुद्धि बोलिए या तीनों बोलिए. तो चित्त is going through modifications. What is modification? We'll understand. And yoga can bring about the complete stoppage, removal, cessation. It brings complete stoppage of the modifications of chitta. So yoga can help Purush acquire the right knowledge, and thereby this chitta will disappear and Purush will know I am different from this body. Okay. So what is chitta? आपको मालूम है वृत्ति क्या है? अभी हम लोग देखेंगे. निरोध is like elimination. फिर से देखें तो दुख निरोध टर्म भी मिल रहा है. ये लोग बुद्धिज्म वगैरह के साथ काफी कनेक्टेड रहे हैं. सम्यक समाधि is nothing but yoga. Here also the final अष्टांग योग, उधर अष्टांगिक मार्ग, अष्टांग योग में फाइनली समाधि. अभी देखेंगे यम, नियम, आसन, प्राणायाम, प्रत्याहार, धारणा, ध्यान, समाधि, सम्यक समाधि. Okay. So now you already know Prakriti, Purush come in contact and the evolute is Mahat. Evolute is Buddhi. Now what is Prakriti? Prakriti is active. Prakriti is unconscious. And what is Purush? Purush is inactive, but Purush is conscious. When there is Mahat, Buddhi, call it right now Chitta, it has become conscious and it is active. This is like a kind of integration. The analogy could be of, as I previously told you, iron is generally what? Cold. And fire is formless. It has no definite form. But imagine that there is a kind of iron ball, and what you do, you put it into some fire. And then iron, which is cold, is now hot. Fire has a formless but has got a form. So this is like how Purush, due to its ignorance, is identifying with what is not self. And the consciousness is extended to this. Eventually, through yoga, Purush would know I'm different from Prakriti. It will withdraw the light of consciousness. और जैसे कभी एक बार लाइट गई थी and suddenly everything fades out. टेलीविजन देखने लाइट गया सब बंद. जैसे ही कॉन्शियसनेस गायब, चित्त disappears. Okay, and Purush realizes its perfection, केवल ज्ञान, isolation. तो चित्त समझ में आ गया आपको. Now, चित्त is like Karan Chitta. There is a kind of cosmic mind also. And there's an empirical sense of I, empirical ego, which is like Karya Chit. तो चित्त भी दो लेवल पे है. Now, yoga is that whereby this vritti can be eliminated or can be brought to an end. Okay, what are the different kinds of modifications or vritti? Modification as in you have some clay and you mold it in different ways. So जो चित्त है वो है प्रकृति का evolute, but now it is also conscious. So it can go through certain changes or there can be different modifications. So what are the important modifications of chitta? One of them can be seen as praman, and you understand praman. They accept three praman: प्रत्यक्ष, अनुमान and शब्द. वही जनरली जैसे है. However, थोड़ा सा प्रत्यक्ष में ऐसा है that imagine there is a pot and chitta, an empirical individual is looking at it. So what has happened? It's chitta is going to the object and takes the form of that. So chitta can actually take the form of what it is witnessing, and this is like pratyaksha jnana. So there is some kind of impact. सीधे सीधे ऐसे समझिए अभिवृत्ति के लिए दैट you read a message and there is a change in your state of mind. Okay, either we are more inclined towards mundane empirical life, or some book you read and you get detached from the empirical life. तो कुछ चीजें that may reinforce dogma, prejudices, ignorance are those vritti which is further strengthening the bond between prakriti and purush, and some vritti can be such that it may inspire you to seek knowledge, contemplate, meditate, and thereby you may also get alienated from the mundane empirical objects of attraction. तो वृत्ति तब तक रहेगी जब तक ignorance है, because पुरुष is not going to have any kind of change, क्योंकि पुरुष is inactive, pure consciousness. तो एक जो वृत्ति है वो है प्रमाण. Okay, then we can think about some cases where you make error. Viparyaya. तो viparyaya is erroneous cognition. You think it is a snake, but actually it is a rope. So the knowledge that there is a snake has no correspondence with reality. तो modification यहाँ भी है, but this is like erroneous cognition. तो प्रमाण, विपर्यया. Then we can think about vikalp. Vikalp contextually can be many words, but as you remember, nirvikalp, savikalp, यानी कुछ conceptualization. Certain things can be at the level of concept, but there may not be a counterpart. देखा जाए तो आप justice को भी एक concept के रूप में समझ सकते हैं कभी-कभी. और there can be certain sentences which may have certain words, and the words are actually redundant, but you do make sense of that. For example, you already know what is a purush, pure consciousness, and आपने लिखा था कि पुरुष is not like a substratum of consciousness. पुरुष and consciousness are one and the same. Okay, लेकिन कभी ऐसे बोल सकते हैं consciousness of पुरुष. इस सेंटेंस में देखा जाए तो ये of जो है, it is just an imagination. It is actually not referring to anything. It is same consciousness, पुरुष are one and the same. लेकिन एक concept के रूप में कभी-कभी आप कुछ चीजों को imagine करते हैं. And this is another kind of vritti, which is like vikalp. It may happen that sometime we go into a deep state of sleep, and at that time, during the sleep, we don't know anything. It is almost like a dreamless also. And after you get up, you may feel very good, rejuvenated. हंसी आएगी बहुत चेहरे पे, स्माइल, दोस्त बोलेंगे क्या हो गया, मजा आ गया, सो के I slept really well. तो ये जो recollection है that I slept really well is again like a kind of vritti modification. तो निद्रा is also a modification. यानी चित्त में कितने तरह के वृत्ति हैं, we are creating the categories. Okay, you would have read something long ago and suddenly it may be recollected. If now we are discussing few things, अभी आपने अरिस्टोटल को याद किया, तो कुछ modifications हुए. You were not reading, you had gone back and you recollected what had he said. तो ये क्या था एक तरह से स्मृति. ये हैं 5 kinds of modifications. Okay, तो प्रमाण, विपर्यया, विकल्प, निद्रा and स्मृति. All of these are 5 kinds of vritti modifications. But when you again examine all the possible modifications, you realize that some of them are forms of क्लेश. बहुत क्लेश करता है ये. तो ये है क्लेश that is afflicted. And क्लेश से आप क्लिष्ट भी कर सकते हैं. Some modifications are afflicted. What do? They further reinforce the tie between Prakriti and Purush. Purush already strongly identifies with what it is not. So primarily ये वो afflicted modifications हैं, ये भी वृत्ति हैं, afflicted हैं. But if it is reinforcing, that is Purush is identifying with what it is not. So the root cause is like avidya. And when there is avidya, there is a sense of I, asmita. And what happens due to that? We have rag, we have dvesh, we have abhinivesh. So these are afflicted modifications. क्या मतलब है इसका? वृत्ति है, कुछ वृत्ति ऐसे हैं जो rooted हैं अविद्या में. And what do? They further add this bonding. And we are all the more strongly in a deep state of ignorance. तो ये सब क्या कर रहे हैं? Bondage को further strengthen कर रहे हैं. And there will be some aclist, non-afflicted modifications which will weaken the bonding. And they can pave the path towards liberation. समझ रहे हैं स्टोरी अभी तक की? So what is avidya? You already know, ignorance. This is like that sense of ego, aham, sense of I, me, myself. And then, if we identify with all our body senses, we have attachment. We are having that thirst for the pleasures of the senses. So there is a strong liking and there is a strong aversion. If something is not giving us that happiness, जैसे पर्पल या कुछ और सब्जियों को लेके कुछ लोगों में हो सकता है. And then अभिनिवेश, clingingness, कितना मजा आता है इस pleasure में दोबारा पैदा होना. So there is this clingingness to the pleasures of the senses, will to be born, will not to die, and to continue enjoying this pleasure. तो अब जो non-afflicted होंगे वो कौन से होंगे? अष्टांग योग. Okay? तो पहले यहाँ तक लिखते हैं and then we'll come to अष्टांग योग. लिखें. योग, इसमें हेडिंग है ये conception of योग. Okay? Yoga is defined as the, आपको तो शब्द मालूम है, cessation of the modifications of chitta. Yoga is defined as the cessation of the modifications of chitta. Parenthesis में कहा गया वो? हाँ, योगश चित्त वृत्ति निरोधा. योगश चित्त वृत्ति VRTTI निरोधा. Thus, yoga prescribes a way of life whereby the modifications of a chitta can be eliminated. Chitta implies antahkaran. Chitta implies antahkaran. Internal organs. Chitta implies internal organs. It consists of, या internal organs हाइफन देके भी डैश देके भी लिख सकते हैं. It consists of महत और बुद्धि, अहंकार, ego, मनस, mind. महत MAHAT और बुद्धि includes अहंकार and manas. महत parenthesis में बुद्धि includes ahankar and manas. Hence, chitta and mahat are one and the same. Hence, chitta and mahat are one and the same. Chitta or mahat is the first evolute of Prakriti. It is the first evolute of Prakriti. Chitta has a predominance of sattva. Thus, despite being unconscious, it has the power to reflect Purush. Despite being unconscious. Why it is unconscious? Because it is the evolute of Prakriti. But why it has the power to reflect Purush? Because it has Sattva Pradhan. So despite being unconscious, it has the power to reflect Purush. Hence, Chitta appears conscious. Yeah, Chitta becomes conscious. Chitta appears conscious. When Chitta is related to an object, it assumes the form of that object. This form is called vritti, parenthesis modification. Purush is pure conscious. It is trigunatit. But due to its ignorance, Purush identifies itself with its reflection in the Chit. But due to its ignorance, Purush wrongly identifies itself with its reflection in the Chit. Purush believes to undergo change and modification. Purush believes to undergo change and modifications. Chitta is the physical manifestation of Purush. Chitta is the physical manifestation of Purush. In a red hot iron ball, formless fire appears spherical and cold iron appears hot. Similarly, next line, naya sentence look at similarly, in the Chitta, Purush, who is passive, who is passive, inactive, appears to change. And Chit, which is unconscious, appears to be conscious. Purush, who is passive, inactive, appears to change. And Chit, which is unconscious, appears to become conscious. Appears to be conscious. When the Purush realizes its true nature, it no longer identifies with its reflection in the Chitta. When Purush realizes its true nature, it no longer identifies with its reflection in the Chitta. It realizes, it attains, or it acquires, it attains the discriminatory knowledge. It attains or it acquires the discriminatory knowledge. Hence, it withdraws from the Prakriti. It withdraws from the Prakriti. Chitta is no longer conscious, since the light of consciousness is taken away. And thereby, the modifications of the Chitta come to an end. The modifications of the Chitta come to an end. एक लाइन एक हेडिंग बना ही लीजिए, लेकिन है एक ही लाइन. कारण चित्त एंड कार्य चित्त. कारण चित्त is the cosmic mind, while karya chitta is the empirical mind of the purush. अब हेडिंग बनाइए, kinds or types of vritti, parenthesis modification. So kinds of vritti, the types of modifications. Chitta can have 5 kinds of vritti. There are 5 kinds. There are 5 kinds of vritti. चाहे तो पहले 5 को लिख दें. प्रमाण, नंबर 2 विपर्यय, विकल्प, निद्रा, स्मृति. Okay, so now one by one. Praman. Yoga accept 3 praman. Hyphen, pratyaksh, anuman, and shabd. Pratyaksh, anuman, and shabd. चाहे तो ABC कर दें, and then we can write one line on each one of the 3. तो A, pratyaksh. In pratyaksh, comma, chit comes in contact with the external objects through the sense organs. In pratyaksh, chit comes in contact with the external objects through the sense organs and assumes its form. जैसे मैंने आपको पिक्चर बना के दिखाया था. And assumes its form. B लिखिए, अनुमान. Through अनुमान, चित्त acquires the knowledge through reasoning on the basis of universal rules and principles. Shabd. By studying the scriptures, Chitta undergoes modifications. By studying or through the study of the scriptures, by studying the scriptures, Chitta undergoes modifications. So all of them were about one kind of vritti praman. अब लिखिए second, viparyaya. It is erroneous cognition. It is erroneous cognition, comma, like rope hyphen snake. There's no correspondence between the knowledge and the fact. There's no correspondence between the knowledge and the fact. Third, लिखें विकल्प. Vikalp is based on abstract imagination. Yes, Vikalp is abstract imagination. Vikalp is abstract imagination, comma, it is based on words. For instance, in single quote ही दीजिए, in consciousness of Purush, unquote, comma, there is nothing corresponding to of. In consciousness of Purush, there is nothing corresponding to of, comma, since Purush itself is conscious. Fourth लिखिए निद्रा. It is the absence of cognition. It is the absence of cognition. Here, tamas predominates. However, despite being in deep state of sleep, despite being in the deep state of sleep, there is modification. there is modification. Since the person says, I slept well or I slept sound. फिर लिखिए स्मृति. Smriti is a modification on the basis of memory. A modification through memory. It is a modification on the basis of memory या modification through memory. अब एक हेडिंग बनाएं. क्लिष्ट and अक्लिष्ट modifications या वृत्ति. क्लिष्ट without a and अक्लिष्ट modifications या वृत्ति. लिखें. क्लिष्ट वृत्ति is afflicted modification. क्लिष्ट वृत्ति is afflicted modification. It strengthens the union of चित्त and पुरुष. It strengthens the union of चित्त, चाहे तो पैरेंथेसिस में प्रकृति भी लिख सकते हैं, and पुरुष. अक्लिष्ट वृत्ति is non-afflicted modification. It paves the path for the attainment of discriminatory knowledge. It paves the path towards discriminatory knowledge. It paves the path towards discriminatory knowledge. It culminates into kaivalya, parenthesis liberation. It culminates into kaivalya. Klishta vritti consists of 5 kinds of क्लेश. Consists of 5 kinds of क्लेश. तो चाहे तो पहले नाम लिख दीजिए. अविद्या, अस्मिता, राग, द्वेष, अभिनिवेश. Okay? Done? So we'll develop these 5 and then aklishta will be yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, and 1 or 2 lines on God, and yoga will be over. So tomorrow itself we'll be able to say goodbye to Patanjali, and we'll see if time would permit, we will begin with the Mimamsa as well. Okay? Chali, thank you for your participation. See you all tomorrow at 5:30 p.m.